Hey everybody, Misty Williams from Creative Entrepreneur Radio. I'm super excited to share with you this really fun interview with Dan Morris of Blogging Concentrated fame. Dan is a Nashville friend who I've been so privileged to watch as he navigated his own entrepreneurial journey over the last, four years or so. I don't even remember how Dan and I met or got connected, but I ended up in one of his mastermind groups and got to kind of experience firsthand the way his really outside the box mind works. And on this call, we actually spent some time talking about different marketing strategies and ideas that he's implemented over the years, and some of the thought that has gone into making some of his efforts a success. We have a really great conversation about how important that whole idea of profiling your audience is, and coming up with your audience personas, and how that's leveraged by really savvy marketers to do some pretty cool stuff to grow their businesses. We have a great conversation too about buying processes, and he tells us about his own journey and some of the experiences that he's had traveling the world, spending time in Romania overseas. We talk about entrepreneurship and how the United States really has a unique flavor or flair for developing entrepreneurs that you often don't see in other parts of the world, and we talk about that a little bit. And Dan shares with us, his the next part of his journey. He's moving his family cross country again, and just has this unbelievable zeal and zest for life and for new experiences, and has used his entrepreneurial journey to really develop himself as a human being. So this is a great interview. I'm so excited that you guys could join us today. Welcome to another episode of Creative Entrepreneur Radio.
Welcome to Creative Entrepreneur Radio. We're going backstage to explore the lives, lifestyles, and growth strategies mastered by seasoned entrepreneurs around the world. Entrepreneurs are gladiators. Are you one of us? If you're a first-time listener, welcome. Feel free to add the podcast to your favorite RSS feed or iTunes, and check out our show notes at creativeentrepreneur.radio.com. Up now, host and founder of MarketechU.com, Misty Williams.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Creative Entrepreneur Radio. I'm Misty Williams here with a really great friend I'm so excited to introduce you guys to. I know Dan Morris from my time in Nashville. Dan and I were friends for several years before I made the big leap to Austin. He's obviously still a friend, and he's someone that I learned a lot from as I've been building and growing MarketechU. He comes at this whole process of building a platform a little bit differently than I do. So I've just always really appreciated the perspective that he lends to strategic conversations, the way that he looks at the world. He's had some unbelievable experiences in his career. He is the founder of Blogging Concentrated, a global training and development company for advanced level bloggers. And he's been working in the online space since 2004. His career began in the infomercial world, helping convert traffic driven from TV and radio spots into online customers. He has since worked with hundreds of bloggers on perfecting their online revenue strategy, utilizing the tools of social media, SEO, and web copy. Dan knows the internet provides many with full-time incomes and wonderful working conditions. He believes that bloggers can build full-time incomes that provide vacations and retirement. His blogs, Dan's Notes and Blogging Concentrated, his Keynote appearances, and Amplify Podcast are designed to help bloggers and online business owners achieve those ends. I'm so excited that you're joining me today, Dan.
I know, this is awesome.
It is so awesome. You brushed your teeth and changed your shirt.
You did not mention, though, that you were the only person that we ever kicked out of our mastermind group.
Right. I have the bona fide distinction of being the only person that you ever kicked out of your mastermind group. Why did you kick me out?
Because Darren and I, after like the first few calls, we kept saying, why is Misty in this group? We should be in her group.
Whatever.
She does not need this group. She's smarter than all of us.
Whatever. You know what was so great about being in any mastermind group, but especially with you and Dan, or you and Darren? First of all, it was just fun talking to you guys. And it was so great for me to be talking to a group of people that kind of held me accountable to actually doing things for myself, for my business. You know, I love digging in and supporting my clients and working on their businesses. And it's easy to kind of forget that I need to work on my business too. So I found it to be super valuable. I would recommend that everybody join your mastermind groups because you, Dan Morse, you have good ideas.
I do like ideas. They're so fun.
Yes. And you are the most outside the box thinker that I think I've got in most of my circles at the moment.
Is awesome.
And we're going to explore some of that outside the box-ishness as we go along because we're going to do some fun storytelling.
I totally love when the Oreos are outside the box because then I can eat them.
Yes. Anything to do with Oreos is pretty much a favorite.
Yes.
I've learned over the years. Yes. Not double stuffed.
No, it's the wrong ratio.
Yes, I got it. Okay. So let's get down to business. I want to say where you got your start, but we're going to, as this conversation goes along, we're going to kind of pick up even previous to where I'm going to say you got your start, because actually where you got your start was like as in adolescence. Like you've had so many great experiences in your life, but I want to start with commercial development. You had a career for a long time in commercial development, and you started getting opportunities while you were in that space that introduced you to the internet online space and exploring those opportunities and turning them into business ventures. And it's really fun and interesting kind of how all this came together. I think it was probably the synergy of, you know, being in a business that was growing or changing or shifting because the world was like all going online, right? So tell us about that.
So I worked with a really wealthy guy and in the real estate world. And I learned quickly on that really wealthy guys have a different, and gals, don't get me wrong, have a different world that they live in than the rest of us. So the gentleman that I worked for, and I've worked for a lot of wealthy people before. You know, in college I worked for Mr. Buffett.
Yes, we're going to talk about that.
But in this particular case, this gentleman had, I don't know, maybe $50 million cash. And when you have that kind of money, what I found really interesting is that not only does the world sort of figure that out, but lots of people on this planet decide that they should bring their idea to you because you have money. Like they might not even know who you are or what you do or what expertise you have. So it seemed to me that every week somebody was somehow was an email, or they came, or they phone call, or a package arrived. There was always these opportunities that he could invest in. There were people. It's like, hey, I have this development in Florida. Would you like to be an investor? Or I have this business idea, or I want to build a rocket and go to the moon, or do you want to fund it? So, in all the time that I worked for the guy, he only took up one product. Now, he did a couple of things on the side, just some small things, but he took up one product, and it was a company called OPC Factor, and it was developed by a mad scientist out in Oregon. And he came up with an antioxidant product that really was somewhat miraculous in terms of what it did for people. Not that it had any miraculous ingredient, but the way that it worked really produced some crazy results. So the testimonials alone led him to make some phone calls that day. And in fact, one person that he randomly called she was driving in Atlanta, and she pulled over on the side of the highway because she was so excited about the product, and she wanted to be able to tell him everything that she thought about it. So there we are in a conference room, and some lady's on the side of the highway with cars whizzing by, and she's telling us how she had macular degeneration and she was about to have surgery. And after a month of taking the product, like her eyes were better, which is all explainable, but that was the case.
Yeah.
So he decided to buy the worldwide marketing rights, and we were a commercial real estate company at the time, and very small at that, 3 or 4 people, and I was the only logical one, having some knowledge of the internet, to take on the web part of it. So while while the team, we were doing infomercials and we had production companies and we were on TV and radio. My job, against my will to some degree at first, my job was to figure out how do we make it work when somebody watched the TV show and then decided not to call the 800 number, but to go to the internet and Google the product name and then show up at the website. My job was to figure out how do we make that person turn into a buyer that who actually wants to become a buyer. They just need the right cues. So that's how it all started. I just started tinkering basically and figuring out, this works better if we do this. And, the web, I learned really quickly that web designers are not marketers. They just like to make things pretty.
Right.
So, I would watch the TV show and then I would go to work and I'd look at the website, and it eventually started to dawn on me that how come the TV show doesn't have anything to do with the website? Why are they totally different? Why isn't the message the same? It seems to me that if you're watching the show and you get so excited that you decide to Google it, that when you arrive, it should pretty much be the same message, maybe even stronger, but not a completely different message. So, that was sort of the beginning of, wait a second, all these things should work together.
Right.
Why are they not? And why did the designer not even watch the show? Why did he just design it without really even caring how the traffic got there? Or why did he design it not really knowing what they were supposed to do? Why is everything blue? All of that stuff. So that's where it started.
So when did you kind of start getting traction with it and really start achieving some success? What did that look like?
Well, it always starts with the first conversion, like, wow, how did that happen? What happened that made that occur? And we had some, I would say, consultants, people that, that wanted their hand in the pie and obviously wanted some profit. So they were willing to offer up any assistance we needed with, some sort of hidden agenda. But a few people just pointed tiny little things out. And I started to catch on to the theme of the different things. Because, pointing something out specific is great, but if I can somehow extrapolate that to the other parts, that's when I started to realize, okay, everything needs to be cohesive from beginning to end. And what really started to work was when the message on the landing page matched the message on the show. But the hard part was figuring out what message on, in a 30-minute show was the actual message that got people interested. Because in a 30-minute show, they're talking about all kinds of things, the health benefits of it and what does it do and how does it work and what other ingredients are in it. So trying to figure out what is it that people actually resonate with was the real question. Oh, you know what? I just remembered something. So I went to our call center, which was at the time in New Jersey, and I decided we were going to do some training of the call center employees because they really needed to understand the product better than me because they were actually fielding all the questions from the people calling. So for about a day and a half, all I did was listen to the calls. As people called in, I would listen to how the call center person answered. I'd listen to them follow the script. And I don't know why this is the case, but I would say over the course of 4 or 5 hours, I just happened to catch 4 or 5 people with a Jamaican accent from some part of New York City. When you advertise on TV or radio, you advertise in specific markets. So, you advertise on one station in one area, you might get, one certain kind of demographic, calling in. So you could really start to figure out which demographic resonates. And these 4 people that had this thick Jamaican accent from New York City, they all asked about cleaning the blood, if I remember correctly. They wanted to know how does it clean the blood? So I came home that week and I kept thinking about why does these Jamaicans, why did they care about this particular statement? Because no one else had ever even mentioned it. And I called some friends who had some Jamaican relatives, and I just started getting into the culture of what Jamaican culture looked like. And for some reason, clean blood is like part of the whole concept of the culture.
Interesting.
So we decided to run a print ad in that part of New York City where the entire thing was just about cleaning the blood. That was it. And it did gangbusters. It was crazy. Like, I couldn't even believe it. Like, one ad, and then we sold like 250 units, within, I want to say like 10 hours of the paper being delivered.
Right. This is a really interesting part to me of being a marketer, or, the strategy work that I do with clients. We spend a lot of time on personas. And I think there's this perspective that when you're doing marketing personas, like I don't know if there's like a magic book you're supposed to be reading or whatever, but when I'm working with my clients to do personas, how do we figure things out? We go talk to people and we ask questions, and it's not as scientific as it is more just, cultural and relating and hearing how people talk about things and the words they use and understanding what they value. You get just so much insight just from talking to people and listening. It's unbelievable.
There is no substitute for that.
Yeah.
Like zero. And in fact, the closer you can get to the actual experience, the better off you are. Like listening to the calls and hearing their actual questions. Mm-hmm. I mean, that was as good as it gets, because I could take the call list and I could call them 2 weeks later and ask them what they were interested in when they saw the show, and you'll get totally different answers.
Right.
Like they don't have any idea. It wasn't live in their mind at that point. They're just like trying to come up with stuff at that point so they don't look like an idiot. Mm-hmm. So yeah, getting as close as possible to the actual, the whole process of it is fantastic. Like I'm not a fan of focus groups or anything that really doesn't mimic what people actually do.
You want to find out what their real life experience is. Take me back to that, or let's go through the process now, or let me just go with you while you shop. So much of it's subconscious. We don't even know what we're saying or experiencing unless someone points it out.
So let's go off that. Now, this experience with OPC Factor was many, many years ago. But I say this all the time. Every single job that I've had has prepared me for the one that I have now. Even if it's a totally different world, totally different thing. Even back when I was in or junior high school, when I was selling Christmas trees, that whole process of dealing with people and sales and understanding the angles and the discussion and allowing people to think freely, all of that builds upon itself. Mm-hmm. So here we are in one conversation talking about putting out a print newspaper ad on cleaning the blood based on a phone call. And then I would say 6 years later, I have a client also in New York City who is a dyslexia tutor. And I find out only because we interviewed her clients the actual process that it takes to hire a tutor. And there's no way to really figure that out unless you ask people and really go in depth. Mm-hmm. It just seems to me that if you're a tutor and you should just be saying, hey, is your kid behind in math? If he is, we do home visits, or we're open late, or we do tutoring after school, those kinds of things. But it's not until you really get into the nitty-gritty of human behavior that you realize that a parent doesn't hire a tutor until they've already taken away the iPod, they've already worked with the kid after school, they've already taken away, any extra school activities until the homework is done. They've already taken away having the teacher help, in a special session at school. All of these things have to happen before a parent is willing to say, you know what, we need to pay for outside expertise. Mm-hmm. And I only got that by doing that exact thing, which was talking directly to her clients and asking through the whole process what happened before you dialed her number.
Right. I think one of the things we get enamored with on the business side is we get enamored with our sales process. This is the process we want to take people through, or this is how we want to sell them. And whatever it is that you think you want to do is not nearly as important as what their buying process is. And by mapping your sales process to their buying process, you can create basically a system where you can predict the kind of sales that you're going to get by the number of leads that you have. And, you know, we need to bring in more leads at a certain point in their, you know, buying process and intersect with them at the right times. And yeah, it's a game changer. It like makes everything work.
Just the other day on one of those Facebook groups, somebody asked what kind of Facebook marketing should they do for a commercial sign company that was making, you know, like the highway signs for McDonald's, you know, that's like 200 feet tall.
Mm-hmm.
And what the guy, I don't even know how he got the account, but what the guy doesn't realize is that those things aren't purchased with cash. Those things are funded, you know, are financed. And they require permits from the city. So the process of hiring a commercial sign company involves getting recommendations from the city about who understands local permits and local laws and local regulations, and then maybe even getting with your mortgage company and who have you worked with to fund signs that you trust. It's not really a guess what I heard on Facebook about this company type of situation.
Right.
So, you know, this guy might be going full steam ahead with, you know, I'm going to tweet out these 4 messages about the importance of signs a day. And in the end, that's just not how it works.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
At all.
Mm-hmm. So, Mr. Unconventional Experiences, like hearing you tell your stories, even now, it makes me think of all these stories that I've heard of your experiences, you know, living in different places as a kid, living in Romania. You're probably the travel buggiest person I know. That's an official title. Yes. You've like traveled to so many places and you love traveling, and it's like living, I don't know how long you've been in Nashville now, but I know you're like jonesing to get out. Tell us about this part of you that just loves to travel, that has to be seeing and experiencing something new and different all the time.
Well, it wasn't until I was an adult that I realized that there is something different about me in this particular instance, and that other people don't necessarily live like this. Even the idea that I don't even like to eat at the same restaurant twice.
Right.
Like some people really like to find their favorite thing and keep going back. And I'm like, look, if I found my favorite thing at one place, the next time I eat at that place, I'm missing out on a new favorite at some other place.
We are completely incompatible diners in this way.
Yes. I do not want to go to the same place.
Yes.
I don't even.
And if you go back to the same place, you do not want to have the same thing.
No.
I want a predictable, this is going to be awesome. I know on this menu what is amazing. Let's do amazing and fabulous every time.
I will say that 65% of my meals are not the best. Whereas you probably order...
85 to 90% of my meals are awesome.
Yeah, and I'm more on like 35% are awesome. But
I care about awesome more than you. You care about variety.
Yes. I have a theory in life that if you haven't experienced it, you do not have an opinion.
Yes. And you're an interesting bird in that you experience a lot of things and you still don't have an opinion.
Yes. You
don't even care about...
You really got to get into it. But,
right.
But yeah, ever since I was a kid, my dad was military, so we moved every few years, and then that never stopped for me. You know, I left high school and I actually stayed at home for part of college and worked at the stadium. But then right after that, I did a student exchange with Romania. And then right after that, as soon as I got back, I found a company that was doing business in Romania, and I moved to Illinois, and I worked with them, building truck stops on the border of Romania and Hungary. And that particular bug, that desire to continually move, has never stopped. I mean, my house is for sale right now. You know, we're hoping to move to Minneapolis because, Rachel, my business partner, Rachel Martin, and I, we actually have this keynote that we call the 6 characteristics. And we ask the audience to come up with 6 characteristics that they would love to instill in their children. And one of mine is, and I tell people, you can make up the name of it. Like one of mine is worldliness. Mm-hmm. Like that is the thing I want my kids to really have. And having moved around so much, I know that the world is different pretty much everywhere you go.
Right.
And I hate the idea, like right now in Nashville, I hate the idea that when they built an 18-inch snowman this year, and we're very, very excited about it, that I hate that concept. They built an 18-inch snowman, and they were excited about it. Like, that means they haven't built an 8-foot snowman yet.
Right.
That means they don't know the difference between packing snow and the dust snow, or they don't know any of that. So we're moving to combat that.
Yes, this is our goal.
Yes, I am going to raise them so they understand that the world is different. Mm-hmm. And I actually think that, and this is extreme, but I think you shouldn't even be able to vote unless you've lived outside the United States. Because until you can see what we have and what we don't have, I think there's very little perspective on even the decisions that we have to make in this country, the things that we get. And, unless you can at least stand outside for a day and look back and go, wow, I did not realize that's what freedom actually meant. Mm-hmm. I mean, that concept of it, I think, is almost the most important thing in the world, is that you have the ability to see people for who they are and have the knowledge of other ways of doing things to really appreciate what it is about them that makes them special.
Yeah, I dated a guy from Venezuela, and this was probably probably around 2008. Actually, I think it was during Barack Obama's first run for the presidency, and a lot of people were trying to describe Obama as a socialist. And I remember this guy saying, who came from Venezuela, people just have no clue what they're saying when they say things like that. They don't have the perspective of living in a South American country that is very, very different. There's a dictator there, and the lifestyle and the way people have to live is just so drastically different from what we experience in the States. And it gives him a completely different perspective on what it is we have.
Yeah, and sometimes you get a perspective on what we don't have. So, for instance, living in Romania, right after the wall fell in '94, a few years after, the country had survived under communism for forever. So pretty much every adult knew communism to their core. So going into a store, a shop, where the shopkeeper, the attendant or the clerk, pretty much makes their money from the state, the concept of customer service doesn't exist because it never needed to exist. So it almost, like when you walked into the store, it almost had this feeling of, why are you bothering me? I'm working today. Like why are you making me get up and take your money in exchange for that thing when I am busy back here working?
Right.
So that part, was startling for me. Uh-huh. But on the flip side, because they lived in an oppressive state, their families and friendships were so much tighter than we have ever experienced that it just changed me forever. I remember going to the biggest college party of the year. I taught at the university there, at Alexander Young Cusa University. And I went to this big rager, except for the rager started at 7 p.m. And you were supposed to bring a covered dish. And I thought, what? This is not a college party. And I arrived at a house that had 100 students in it. And in each room, the students were seated all over the room. And there was almost always somebody with a guitar, and they were singing and they were talking. And I remember at 2 a.m, there was a group of people who were all talking about what they wanted to be when they grew up. And we're talking about college here. And some of them wanted to be homemakers. They wanted to have kids and they wanted to raise a family, and they talked about the different kind of house they wanted. But the idea that they actually had a sincere, deep conversation where other people, the idea that you want to grow up to be a homemaker at a college party, this never happens in the United States because it's too sincere. It's too deep. We don't have those kinds of relationships necessarily. But these people loved each other so much as a unit, as a community, as a student body, that they just supported each other. And in a way that I had never experienced prior to that. And I thought, man, I wish that we, on a general level, had this kind of a deep love and respect for each other that they have, and we just don't. We have things, and in their homes, the kids live in the living room, the parents live in the guest room, the grandparents live in the main room, and then when they die, everyone shifts. So the idea that you live together and everybody has a shelf, but nobody has a room. Everybody has each other, but nobody has an Xbox. Mm-hmm. I just learned so much about what we don't have that I really strive to take really good care of the friendships that I have, trying to, make sure that I don't ever let the shallowness of Facebook take over what is a real friendship.
Sure. So one of the things that this kind of brings up for me is I remember you talking about going into, I don't know if it was in Romania or one of your other travels, and they had the opportunity to be entrepreneurial now, to create something that was there, they being the people in the country. And it was just so not a part of who they are or how they were raised that it was such a foreign concept that people didn't really take advantage of the opportunity. So it made innovation and growth really hard and challenging.
Oh, extremely.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about that, and then kind of connect that back to us to your entrepreneurial bug. I don't think that you come from like a super entrepreneurial family, unless I'm missing something, but you've like through and through have the hallmark of an entrepreneur in everything you've done. Even when you worked for other people, you were doing your own thing.
So, and I taught a free enterprise class at Alexandria on Cusa, and I thought that the example of a lemonade stand was going to be, like something that we were going to talk about for the first day. But we ended up talking about the lemonade stand for, I'm going to say, 3 weeks. And at every level of talking about that, it was almost like pounding into them what it really meant. Whereas here in the United States, the lemonade stand is such a, 3-year-olds get it. It is such a part of our culture. It's hard to even understand how much it's not part of other people's culture. But at no level did most of the students understand why. Why would we sell lemonade, out on the street? And then, it would be very, very simple, because we could make money. And then it'd be like, well, but why would you need to make the money? What would you do with it? Why wouldn't you be studying? So every part of that whole entrepreneur thing that somehow, and I'm not really even sure, but somehow our society is designed entirely around it. Whether it's growing up with advertisements or whether it's family and friends, but you and I both know that the lemonade stand is not foreign to anyone here. It's very, very easy to understand. And even from an early age, I was the top salesman of magazines for the fundraising group at in high school. Or I actually sold 2 Christmas trees to somebody once, just trying to convincing them they needed one on 2 different levels. But that part of us, I think I would never see unless I left, how deeply entrenched capitalism is even in our government workers. Right. How entrenched it is in what we do.
Right.
Now, I grew up in a military family. I will say that my mother, I never really thought about this before, but my dad was Air Force, and my mother had jobs. But I believe that she has always had a bit of an entrepreneurial side to her because she did a lot of freelance work. She was a computer programmer. She knew COBOL and BASIC and C++, and I remember her having contract jobs, which I think meant that she was, a freelance person, and she had her own business. And she was also a calligrapher. She did a lot of calligraphy for different, events and activities. So part of where I got the desire to be an entrepreneur probably comes from her, although I've never thought about that before. Because when you're in the military, that's not even that's not a part of anything that you do.
Right.
But for some reason, she's always had something on the side, And about 4 years ago, maybe 5, they started PorchIdeas.com, and that's their full-time income now. And they have both been entrepreneurs now for 4 or 5 years, running a niche website that talks about how to paint your front door to make your house look pretty, or best kinds of doormat to have, or how to pick different columns for your front porch. Anything that has to do with a front porch, they've built kind of a mini empire within that niche that really wasn't a niche.
Mm-hmm.
So I can thank them for the most part for at least fostering the idea and not poo-pooing it.
Sure. So a few years ago, you were kind of going through a bit of a transition in your own life, kind of moving away from a lot of the commercial development stuff and really looking for the path, the next phase of your life professionally. And I remember a conversation we had where I was like, whatever you do, you have to be traveling. And we talked a little bit about, how much you enjoy speaking and being on the road and all of that kind of stuff. Why don't you tell us a little bit about this metamorphosis that you've been going through? And the last couple of years, you've been really focused on supporting people in the blogging space through Blogging Concentrated. And it's really fun to hear about all the things that are happening and what you and Rachel are doing together to grow that business and some of the fun stuff you have coming up too.
So I recently watched a video. The Steve Harvey guy? Do you know him?
Uh-huh.
This guy, I don't know how he got to where he is or even how he's transformed himself, but he has some really fantastic videos for entrepreneurs to look at. And one of them was, and this is terrific. I'll never be able to say this like Steve Harvey. But you hear this all the time. People say, follow your passion. And in this particular talk that he gave, he said, never follow your passion. Follow your gift. And I thought, this is a really interesting concept. His idea of this was that his passion was basketball. Like he loved basketball. That was his main thing. Like he played basketball all the time and he dreamed that he was going to be in the NBA and that's what he wanted to do. But he knew that that was not his gift. He was not Michael Jordan. So at some point in time, when this concept came to him that you should follow your gift, he realized that his gift was making people laugh, taking normal situations and turning them something that gave people smiles. And following that gift and losing the passion of travel or of basketball kind of led him to where he is now, which is he is leveraging his gift for the benefit of everyone around him. And he gets to now, play basketball whenever he wants, but he realized that that was an uphill battle that he was never going to reach. So as it goes back to your question or your statement, in developing Blogging Concentrated, I have just recently figured out that we created a business that allows us to travel, which is like my favorite thing to do on the planet. Like just travel. I actually get paid to travel. But it wasn't by design necessarily. Like I didn't think, and I kind of wish that I had, but this is better to have worked out this way. Many, many times I've seen other people who like their job takes them to China because they're a buyer or something and they get to go negotiate with all kinds of buyers in China. And I always thought, man, they have the coolest job in the world. They get to travel all the time. But I think if I had pursued that, I had looked for a sales job or I looked for something where I get to travel, then I wouldn't have ended up where I am now, which is always just sort of following the thing that I think I'm really good at. And somehow travel has become a part of that. Now, the method by which travel has become a part of that is really, I guess I don't want to say out of necessity, but for a while there, bloggers would get together as a group, or maybe they had an informal group, and they would ask if I would come to their little retreat, and I would teach for 4 or 5 hours or 6 hours or something at their retreat. I would be like the guest speaker for their retreat, and I really liked that. I thought that was fantastic. I got to teach for 6 hours. That is awesome. Well, one day I realized, this kind of goes back to one of your Marketuct laws, I realized that why am I waiting for people to call me What is it about that? Why am I waiting? This is not a business model that is going to work, because unless people decide on their own to call me every day, I will never have business. I would just be sitting here waiting. So I made the decision, why don't we pick a city where we know there are lots of bloggers who like what we do, and we will find a venue, and we will instead invite them to come to the venue. Instead of waiting, we will go after it. Well, that worked pretty good. And not only did it work pretty well, but it meant that I could get in front of people that I could not reach otherwise. Because in a local network, bloggers talk to each other, and sometimes they're in other blogging groups, and sometimes they're three and four people away from me. But this was a way that not only could I could meet them, but I could also get in front of them for 8 hours and teach them and become, somebody that is helping improve their business, which seems to have all of the things that you want to happen in business all rolled into one thing. So we started adding cities, going from city to city, and then we realized, you know what? We need to have more than one curriculum, not so that we can go back, but so that we can actually teach more. Because, just like school, you can't just have one subject. There's so much to learn. So we ended up developing 7 different curriculum for all different parts of, being a professional. And now go back to the cities and take them to new places. And we took a little lesson from comedian Kevin Hart. Kevin Hart, he recently played Madison Square Garden. And at the end of his comedy act, he comes back out on stage, kind of like a rock star would do an encore. And he had tears in his eyes, and he looked around at the stadium, and kind of like he was taking in the moment, like, smelling the roses. And he said, I am the second comedian to ever sell out Madison Square Garden. This has been my goal since I was a kid, and here I am. Like, you could see it in his eyes. This was the thing that he'd waited his entire life for, and he was actually taking it in. He was enjoying the moment. And I knew at that moment, that second in time, I looked at him, I said, do you know what he did that we're not doing? Kevin Hart, just like us, played gigs in different cities, just like a rock band or, like we do. But instead of going to the Denver Public Library and reserving a room and inviting people to come, Kevin Hart went to comedy clubs where there was already an audience, where there was already a marketing machine in place. And all he had to do was put his name on the poster, and lots of the other work was done for him. So I said, you know what? That's what we need to change. We need to start partnering with conferences and blogging groups, and we needed to get them to do some of the work for us so that we can spend more time writing curriculum and travel and less time trying to drum up business for each different city. So it seems like every little thing that we do, we keep getting stronger and we get to more places. And now, in a couple of weeks, we're going to be in New Zealand on a 5-city tour there.
So fun.
And it just seems like as long as we can be the very best teachers that we can be, that this business can grow, at this point in time, can grow as much as we have time until we figure out the next part, which is how do you scale something like this. But so far, I have somehow built a business where we get to travel and we get to follow our gift while doing the passion.
Right, which is kind of the nice sweet spot, right?
It is. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't by design. It's just sort of all those things came together.
Right. So the Marketech law that you referenced is the law of leverage. Tall buildings and big bridges are built within a symphony of support. Money, expertise, materials, equipment, workers in the right locale. To build my business, I will learn to engage the services of others to handle responsibilities that are not my gift, to free my time, and to enhance my flow. I will invest in the infrastructure my business needs to be able to grow. I will create win-win partnerships that expand my platform and influence.
And a lot of people might read that and think that has a lot to do with outsourcing and building a team and providing leverage. But for me, that went right back to Kevin Hart And that was, why am I not leveraging the locations that actually provide me a traffic source that I am fighting every day to get when I don't really have to?
I know. It's interesting that you're saying this, because one of the realizations that I had right after I moved to Austin is I have all of these agency contacts of people who, they've got people coming to them, like publicity agents or, literary agents or whatever. They've got people coming to them wanting to grow their business, and they tell me all the time that, my clients need what you offer, but my business model didn't align well with agencies because of the way that you hired me. It was such an intimate relationship between me and the person, that ultimately hired. And I started racking my brain around this, like, this is silly. There has to be a way, because I know that what they're saying is right. If they come alongside, there's a way that we can support them that's going to make everything the agent is doing for them work even better. And so I've been putting together the pieces of that, which is, aligned with my business, but it's a very similar thing. I think probably after you're in this game for a while, you start to bump your head against the wall enough times that you've got to see this differently. It's really powerful.
It is. Some people are afraid of search engine optimization, but by itself, it is leverage.
Right.
Because if you're Walgreens and you're on the corner of Main and Main, you don't have to convince people to drive 4 blocks out of their way.
Right.
They're already there.
Right.
So if you can figure out where your audience is searching online and you can be there, you don't have to convince them to come. You can use the leverage that the search engines give you.
Mm-hmm.
There are lots of ways to find leverage, and they can almost always be a win-win.
Yeah, totally.
Like for us, when we do an add-on at a conference, my number one goal is to provide so much value to the attendees that they love the conference that they sign up to go to, not Blogging Concentrated. But they feel like the conference that they went to, we added so much value, it made it an even better conference. Because then not only does the conference win, but I got to teach, and there's a really good chance we'll be able to go back again.
Right. Right. So let's do one more Marketech law. And I know we kind of probably should wind this thing down, but you have such a great perspective on these laws. I love it. So, law of sequencing. I will do the right things in the right order. I will not skip steps or make decisions out of fear or the need to be busy. I will use discipline and work smart.
So this law needs a corollary.
Yes.
And the corollary would be...
Of course.
The corollary would be... Wait, what did you call it? It is the law of sequencing?
Uh-huh.
It would be... hire a smart person to help you figure this out. Because
it's
let me tell
implied
you,
in the law. It's implied in the law.
because you can do a lot of stuff and just miss something.
Yeah.
But there is so much value in having, and we call it infrastructure.
Yes.
With the law of sequencing. Without the infrastructure in place, let me just give you an example.
Please.
You just started a website, and you're about to start writing some articles, and then you're thinking you're going to write blog posts for a while, and you're just going to start amassing fans, and then at that point you figure you'll branch out. Maybe you'll sell books, or you'll do affiliate marketing or whatever. So a lot of people start out this way. They have this idea, they come up with a good domain name, and they just, all right, I get it. I set WordPress up, and I'm going to start writing. But one critical thing and I don't think you get this until you've been doing it a while. One critical thing that you're missing in the law of sequencing is, and I guess I would call it the point or the focus, and that is, if you could step back for 5 minutes, and instead of just delving in to your first blog post, you could write a simple ebook, a printable. You could record yourself like this, like on an audio. You could do something that is going to bring value to your audience. You're going to create this asset. If you just start with an asset, then everything else that you do from that point as a beginner is so much easier, because you understand how to end. What is the end of this blog post? What do I do at the end? Where do I drive them? Do they just hit the back button and they go back to Facebook? So if you just think if I just have an asset before I start, then not only do I write my first blog post, but then I also say, hey, I'd love for you to I'd love for you to put your name and email in here and let me get to you this great 1-hour audio where I discuss X, Y, and Z. And all of a sudden, you are not only writing your first blog post, but now you're starting to amass an audience, an email audience that you can actually bring back. Mm-hmm. But then if you decide to be a guest, do a guest post or speak at a conference, or you go to a local BNI chapter meeting or something, like you have this, it's not just a blog post, you have an asset for people to go back and get. So I think the law of sequencing is critical, but I almost feel like you need a mastermind group in whatever world you're in, just to get the feedback on what should I have in place now, because I think it's different for basically everybody. But what infrastructure should I have that will make the rest of my life easier? Because if you're not thinking ahead, then you end up 2 years down the road and you realize that your 100 people a day that you've been getting would just go away if you decide to skip, logging on to Facebook today.
Right.
Like you just haven't thought ahead far enough. You haven't really figured out the plan, and having just as simple as one little asset can change the whole thing, can give you purpose. Every time you speak, it gives you something to direct people to. Every time you write a blog post, every time you're in a conversation, whenever you're on Facebook, there's something to drive people to that you can be proud of.
There is something about like that whole architecture thing, and it's interesting that you would say this because I was just having a conversation last night with a good friend of mine, Mark Filarowski, who's a really seasoned entrepreneur, has owned a lot of businesses, really successful businesses, and he has a startup in Nashville called Anchor that is entering the beacon market. And basically what the Anchor does is has a field around it that communicates with an app and lets people know where their stuff is if they're within 200 feet of the app. Anyway, there's like all these ways you can slice and dice this technology. It's making its appearance now as conversation around the Internet of Things and beacon technology. There's a couple already on the market, one called Tile, one called something else. But anyway, there's actually more than two. There's several. But the way that Mark is building his company is so different from how any of these other people are building it, because he has the long view in mind. He understands this idea of scaling and how things have to be built in order to scale in the long term. And it's just been a blast watching him make these strategic chess moves and how he's setting things up so that different parts of the business can scale and continue to scale over time. And he's setting a different trajectory than everyone else. And the difference is really his experience. And, he's been in the game a really long time. And so he sees things a different way. It is so, so valuable to have, that Yoda that has already kind of been down the road and can give you perspective on what you're building so that you build smarter.
So I have this concept called rolling the snowball, and it's one of our main tenets at Blogging Concentrate that we teach. And it kind of goes along with this conversation. And that is, you can build a mountain, or you can build moleholes all around your yard. But there's a good chance that you'll never build a mountain if all you are doing is building moleholes. So if you're not as smart as the Anchor guy, and even me, I just told you in a conversation the other day that I'm not sure where we end up. I don't have a total vision of where this company is going in the end. Mm-hmm. But I know that everything that I do, like we started the Amplify Podcast, and my question always is, I don't exactly know where we're going, but do I have an idea of what direction we're headed? Because I could easily start things that don't help the whole ship keep moving forward. Just if some people start a second website or they have this idea, but it doesn't really leverage their overall main audience, it's not something they can cross-promote. It's not something that helps the overall plan. That if you every step of the way, everything that you do, if you could just take that one thing that what did you say the guy's at Anchor's name was?
Mark.
That Mark's doing when he's thinking about scaling is, if you write a blog post, how does that help you in 6 months? Like what's in it? Is it search engine friendly so that in 6 months the search engines are going to be finding it? Like, what are the things that are going to help you 2 weeks from now, 6 months from now, a year from now, so that you actually leverage that moment in time for more than just tomorrow's readers? And I don't think you have to be Einstein. I don't think you have to have your entire plan laid out, to the T, like some linear people are. But I do think you have to have an idea of where you're headed. And then you have to use that idea as the filter for everything that you're doing. Because once you get sidetracked by something that doesn't help you get to the end, like, it's very hard to get back on track. You just get derailed. And everything you do should breed new opportunities. So if we start the Amplify podcast and it's all about helping bloggers and that breeds new opportunities, then those new opportunities should somehow be aligned with our overall goal. But if I decide to start a podcast on parenting and that breeds new opportunities, how do I say no to opportunities when the ship is really going left and I'm going right? So the whole concept of all of this is the concept of thinking ahead and planning and having that strategic vision and scaling is just using that part of your brain as the filter for all the things that you're doing.
So are you going to write a book about that, Dan?
I am writing a book about that.
It's so exciting. It's really fun to just get your take on what it's like to build a business really based around your expertise. It's been a blast watching you and Rachel grow Blogging Concentrated, and of course getting to know Rachel. She's so fantastic. She was actually the very first guest on Creative Entrepreneur Radio. It was lucky to have it.
She always beats me at stuff.
I know. She was awesome. It was a really fantastic episode conversation. And anyway, I love you guys both so much and really appreciate you coming on today. How can people find you if they want to learn more about Dan or Rachel or about Blogging Concentrated, or maybe to sign up on your list to be notified about your book? Where are you at?
Well, I wouldn't use your car to come find me because we travel a lot.
Right.
And I'm about to move. So while I'm in Mount Juliet, Tennessee right now, I'm hoping that someone, maybe even you, buys my house today so that I can move on with the next chapter.
Yes.
But online, I'm always at Dan R. Morris on Twitter all the time. And that's probably my favorite medium to talk with people. And then Free Weekly Mastermind is our forum where we talk about all these kinds of things on Facebook. But otherwise, our home base is Blogging Concentrated, which in theory, in the next few days, is going to have a new mobile awesomeness upgrade that will make it even better.
That's awesome. Well, I'm so grateful that you took the time. It was so much great content in this episode. I'm really excited for people to hear it and learn more about you. And I feel like we captured some of the Danigan's personality in this one, which is so fun.
The good news is I have my personality on me at all times.
At all times. It's the truth. It's the truth. It's what makes
whether you
so
like
awesome.
it or not.
Yes. But you can't help but like it. Come on.
I don't know. There are some people.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time with us today, and I'm excited to see how things go in New Zealand. I'll be keeping tabs and watching for your book to come out, and you've already actually got a chapter in a couple of books, don't you?
Oh, yeah, but
Joel
that's not nearly as awesome as writing your own.
Yeah.
Although, I must say, what is next for this podcast?
For Creative Entrepreneur Radio?
Yeah, you have more awesome people coming up.
Oh my gosh, I have enough people without even tapping my network, which I'm excited to do. I could seriously release an episode a week for like 2 years.
Wow.
And this is without like shaking the trees and finding amazing new relationships. So, I love telling these stories and getting to know other entrepreneurs and hearing what's working for them and what lessons they've learned along the way. And there's just something about entrepreneurs being able to share in each other's journeys. We don't always get the chance to do that. We have our shoulder to the grindstone so often, and a lot of times this journey can be kind of lonely,
Well, speaking of your journey, in this podcast, would you say that getting to this, where you're doing your own podcast, is this something that you think you should have done earlier? Is this the right time?
So much earlier. I could have done, you have to just trust that it's the right time, right? But once I got comfortable with the idea, I remember whenever it first came up, it was in a conversation with my friend Scott, and I was trying to tell him why he should do a podcast. And as I was selling him on it, I was thinking, oh my God, this would be so fun. I wish I could do something like that. For whatever reason, I felt disconnected. Obviously I could have right in that moment gone and just
So what was your moment that changed it for you?
I think just continuing to think about it, and a lot of things were shifting in my business, and I knew I needed to go. I knew I needed to go in a way that I could build a platform for my ideas beyond just working one-on-one with my clients. I feel like I'm moving into a phase in my own career where there's some conversations that I want to create a platform to talk about because I think they're important, and I don't see people talking about them enough. So that was kind of the impetus, thinking I want to talk about certain things and put stuff out there, and it doesn't matter if you're hiring me or not, but I want you to think about this. And that's kind of where this idea, at first it was Entrepreneur All Access was the initial name for it. And then as I got into it more and fleshed it out a little more, I realized that really the theme in my relationships were creative entrepreneurs, whether it was, being in Nashville and that amazing creative community. Austin has its own great creative community, but people that are really doing outside the box things, so that creative label really resonated with me. And I feel like what I'm doing is really creative. What I've built is, different and outside the box. I was really early to the game of building a virtual team and all of that stuff. So, I think it kind of just germinated. Once the idea was planted in my head, I just kept toying with it, and this is what's come of it now. And I'm not even sure where it's going, kind of like you probably feel with Blogging Concentrated. I'm not sure exactly where it's going to go, but the trajectory feels really, really right to me, and I'm just having a blast with it. So
if you were a creative entrepreneur and you're listening to the show and you find yourself doing a lot more of the work than you really want to be doing, you're just bogged down with work that's keeping you from being awesome, then I think that you should contact Misty, because she is the very best person when it comes to taking your vision, putting it on paper, figuring out who does and how does all the work get done, so that not only can you grow, but you can grow into a business that represents who you really are at the core.
Do I have to pay you for this?
I think that she's the best person for that. And
I'm going to get a bill.
And I think you should call her, because that's what she does. And awesome. I think if you're thinking ahead, I think you should set aside some money. I think you should, it takes $386,000 to get a Subway franchise. If you have been building your business off of a $7 domain name, I think that you should take a few dollars out and hire Misty and leave a few dollars under the table so that you can give her a tip when you are done. Because you will appreciate it that much.
Oh, you're awesome, Dan. Thank you.
This is what I'm saying.
Well, give the wife and kids a big hug, especially for that cute baby girl. We should put your kids' pictures on the page on Creative Entrepreneur Radio, just so people can enjoy the cheeks.
Well, that will certainly improve the look, because they have it over me.
You have all of your kids and your wife. You guys have the best cheeks ever. So thank you. In your cheeks.
Well, there was a sale at Walmart, and I went in bulk.
Yes, for joining us. I'm so excited to see what the future holds, and we'll have to kind of do a check-in with Dan in another year or two, whenever Blogging Concentrated has taken on whatever this new phase is going to look like, and talk about it again. It'd be a blast.
We are going to someday be a global powerhouse.
Awesome.
Global being the main word.
Right. All over the world. World domination.
Yes.
All right. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. Thank you so much, Dan.
Well, thanks for having me. Rachel and I most appreciate all that you offer the world.
Thank you. All right, everyone. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to Creative Entrepreneur Radio. If you've enjoyed this episode, please leave us a review on iTunes. That helps others find our show. You can find links, contact information, and a recap of today's episode in the show notes found at creativeentrepreneurradio.com. Tweet Tell Misty. That's TELLMISTY with your thoughts, ideas, or questions, and join the conversation on our Facebook group. You can learn more about Misty and her work over at marketechu.com. See you next time.